Good morning, class, and welcome to week 3 for ESS and geometry. So last week we had talked about how to solve a right triangle for a missing side. We know that across from the right angle is called the hypotenuse. The other two sides were A and B, and we can use the Pythagorean theorem, a squared plus b squared equals c squared. So if I plug in the numbers, 8 squared plus 6 squared, 8 squared is 64, 6 squared is 36, 64 plus 36, is 100, and then take the square root, and we get our answer is 10. So our missing side, the hypotenuse, is 10. So what if we didn't know one of the sides, but we did know this angle here was 53 degrees. So how can we find this missing side? So we got to have some new tools to use, and we're going to use Trig. So have you ever noticed on your calculators at school, there were 3 buttons that says sine, or people say sin, but it actually stands for sine, cosine, and tangent. So these are our trig functions, and we're going to learn how to use these. But before we can do that, we got to know what they mean. And we also got to know how to label our triangle. So on our triangle, across from the right angle, this is our hypotenuse. That has not changed. But we're not going to call these other two sides A or B or the legs. We're going to find the angle. And want the angle that we know here. Across from that angle, opposite of that angle, we're going to call that the opposite side. And remember back in week 1, there was a question that asked, what if two angles are next to each other, what's that called? Well, it's an angle next to the side, that's not hypotenuse, is called the adjacent. So we're going to label it these: hypotenuse, opposite, and adjacent. So I'm going to use the first letter in our problems. So if I use the H, I'm talking about the hypotenuse. If I use O, I'm talking about the opposite. Okay. So the sine of an angle is equal to the opposite over the hypotenuse. The cosine of an angle is equal to the adjacent over the hypotenuse. And the tangent is equal to the opposite over adjacent. So something that I was taught way back in high school, yeah, I know, kind of long ago, but something that I was taught that stuck with me, so it may help you, is SOHCAHTOA. SOHCAHTOA. So sine is the opposite over hypotenuse. Cosine is the adjacent over hypotenuse. And tangent is the opposite over adjacent. So we're going to take our triangle here, and we're going to create a problem. So first we got to figure out which one of our 3 are we going to use, sine, cosine, or tangent. Well, we are looking for the hypotenuse, and we know the opposite. So which one uses the O and the H? Our sine. So it goes sine and then our angle. So our angle is 53 degrees. So I'm going to write like this: sine 53 is equal to the opposite side over the hypotenuse. So the opposite was 8. The hypotenuse we don't know, so I'm going to use x for that. So we'll have 8 over x. Now we can solve. Okay. So if we have sine 53, so if we put sine 53 in our calculator, so sine 53, we get 0.7986. So I'm going to say 0.8. So 0.8 is equal to 8/x. And now we're going to continue solving for x. If x is in the bottom, we can't solve it, so we need to get it to the other side. So I'm going to move it over here. So we got 0.8x equals 8. And then we can divide by 0.8. And we find that x equals 10. And there's our answer. So same problem we had up here where we used Pythagorean theorem. The difference was this problem had a second side. This problem has an angle. So let's do another example. Okay, so first we need to label. So what's this side called? It's across from the right angle. That's the hypotenuse. Well, let's not label this side yet, because if this is our angle, if we go across from the angle, this one is the opposite side. It's easiest to go in this order. So that means the third side here is our adjacent. Now, SOHCAHTOA. If we know the hypotenuse and we're looking for the adjacent, which one uses the H and the A? Right, this time, it's this one. So the C is cosine. Our angle was 45 equals A over H. So A, we don't know, over H, which was 7. Okay, so we're going to put this part in our calculator, cosine 45. So cosine 45, and we get, answer is 0.707. So I'm going to say 0.7. Okay, this time, since x is on the top, all we got to do is move the bottom over here by multiplying. So 0.7 times 7, which is 4.9. And that is our answer. So by knowing this right here, SOHCAHTOA, that's going to help you set up your problem. The capital letter stands for which trig function, sine, cosine, and tangent. Then you have the angle equals the first side over the second side. We just got to remember to label the triangle. Opposite is across from the angle. Hypotenuse is always across from the right angle. And adjacent is the one next to the angle. And then we find which trig function uses the piece we know and the piece we're looking for. So hopefully this has helped a little bit. Trig is a very complicated topic, but if you get stuck, make sure you reach out for help and just do the best you can.